Every year, many Ontarians roll up their sleeves to get the flu shot. It's prepared specifically to combat the strains expected to dominate that year. Experts say this season is especially tough, and there's also word that the vaccine is delayed. Joining us now for more, Dr. Michelle Murti. She is public health physician with Public Health Ontario, and Jill Promoli, a flu prevention advocate and parent, and we are delighted to welcome both of you here to TVO tonight. Okay, we said in the intro, Dr. Murti, that the flu is expected to be bad this season. How bad?
We don't know. It's too early to say at this time of year. What we know is flu happens every year, and every year it's not a great season. We have, on average, about 12,000 people get hospitalized with influenza, and over 3,500 people die of influenza every year in Canada.
In Canada, those are national figures. Huh. Okay, I'm hearing this business about whatever happens in Australia may have an impact on what happens here. Why would that be the case?
Well, we have, when we have our winter season, they have their summer season and vice versa. So they're having their end of their 2019 influenza season just now. And in Australia did have a tough year. They started very early, almost 3 months earlier than normal. And they've had quite a few influenza cases, the second highest in the last 5 years. The only higher was in 2017 when they also had a very tough year. So we always look to see what's happening there to say, will that happen here? Sometimes we follow them, sometimes we don't. So whether we're going to actually follow them and see what they've seen this year, hard to still say at this time, but the best thing we can be doing now is preparing for the worst and hoping for the best.
Forgive me if this is a ridiculous question, but is part of the concern somebody hopping on a coming here and infecting everybody that way?
We do have some global spread of influenza through that way. At this time of year, most of the cases of influenza that we do see in Ontario are people who have traveled, but we don't see much spread of that because we're still in their summer season now too. So we don't really see that big wave of influenza until later in the year. We typically peak sometime end of December to beginning of February.
Jill, I am glad you are here to tell us your story, but I am sad to have you here because you're associated with this issue for just the worst possible reason.
Yeah, I'd absolutely rather not be part of this conversation at all, but here we are.
Tell us why you are.
So 3 years ago is May 2016, we lost one of our children to the flu, and it happened very quickly. There had been an outbreak at my daughter's school, and it went through the whole class, and nobody at the beginning really knew what it was. It was just this nasty bug, and all of a sudden, all the kids were sick. And it came home with my daughter. It was very mild for her. She was better in less than 24 hours. And then my son Jude woke up with it at the end of the week, and he woke up with a low-grade fever. And hours later, he died. And it was just so fast, and we didn't really understand what had happened to him. And they were later able to confirm through the autopsy that he had died of influenza B causing cardiac arrest. And so we learned very quickly a lot more about the flu than we had understood it to be. All our kids had been vaccinated and they had their flu shot 6 months prior. But of course we know there's some percentage of people who will fail to develop immunity from any vaccine. And unfortunately, that year Jude was one of them. And so when this outbreak came through the community, he was left unprotected.
How old was he?
He was 2 years and 3 months.
How do you go on?
Somebody has to make breakfast for the other kids. So, you get up every day and one foot in front of the other, and that's really all there is after you've lost a child. For the first several months, that's all that we could do. And then when we, learned Jude's cause of death, we thought, well, what if more people understood how serious the flu was? And what if this conversation had been louder a year ago and more people had made a better choice about how to protect themselves and to protect their community? Because we learned at that point that only approximately 34% of Ontarians get a flu shot each year. And so that's not very many. So while it didn't give Jude the protection he needed, the flu shot does prevent approximately 61% of cases in Ontario, despite the low participation rate. And we thought, well, what if we could get more people talking, more people staying home when they're sick, more people taking action, and what if we could make that change for another family so that they don't wake up in our shoes this year or next year or the year after? And so
this has kind of become your mission in life now.
This is it. We have an organization called For Jude for Everyone, and we spend a lot of time now talking about Jude and what happened to him and how people can do their part to protect themselves and also make sure that they aren't the reason that somebody else finds themselves in this situation.
Michelle, mischievous people are going to take this example and twist it around and say, you know what they're going to say. What do you deal with? How do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, I mean, we're just so grateful for Jill and all the work your family's doing around this. It's just really wonderful to share that story. And you know, I think all the difficult stories that we have around influenza like this, you know, we had a patient who, she was pregnant and she fell into a coma and she delivered her baby while she was in a coma and didn't meet her baby until 2 weeks after she was, when she finally woke up. So this is really important stories to share. You know, the flu vaccine is not as good as some of our other vaccines. We have the childhood vaccines like the measles vaccine, which are very highly effective. Flu vaccine is, you know, pretty good. We have a very good record. Last year for the H1N1 component of flu that we saw last year, we had almost 70%. So that means for every 10 people who were vaccinated who would have gotten flu, only 3 people got flu. So yes, it's not perfect. There are going to be people who still get flu with that, but that's still 7 people who did not get the flu because of the flu shot. So that's, you know, that's an amazing reduction. And we're seeing now, you know, new numbers every day. Just recently, a publication came out that seniors with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, almost half of their hospitalizations could be prevented with an influenza shot. So there's so many good reasons to be getting it.
It's mostly seniors, isn't it, who end up dying from the flu if they are not immunized or if it hits?
We do see many of the seniors, deaths is occurring in small children as well. So children under 5 are also one of the high-risk groups that we would absolutely recommend they get vaccinated, as well as their whole family and household to get vaccinated.
How do scientists actually predict how severe the flu is going to be each year?
Well, it's a lot of modeling. It's a lot of looking to see what's happening and very close monitoring as the flu comes in. You know, one of the characteristics of flu compared to other viruses is that when it starts, it goes up pretty quickly, hangs out for a few weeks, and then comes back down. So when we're in that peak of flu season is when it's really the worst, and we're seeing a lot of cases happening. But we also often have now a second wave. So that influenza B often happens later part of the season, so March into the spring, where people maybe aren't even thinking about influenza anymore. They've had the vaccine from a little while ago. So it's, you know, I think that there's always new challenges that we see every year with influenza.
I should ask you about that, Jill, because before the tragedy that befell your family, you know, my hunch is most people think, oh, okay, the flu, you know, it'll knock you out for a few days and then you're back at it. Do people not appreciate how severe it can be?
Absolutely. I think, you know, a lot of us think that the flu is sort of a bad cold or a stomach bug. And I hear this every year. And I hear it from people who've gotten the flu shot. They'll tell me, well, I got the flu shot and I got sick anyway. And then I hear their symptoms and it's like, oh, okay, no, actually you have, you know, a gastro illness. You're dealing with something completely different. There's a lot of misconceptions about what the flu is and how serious it is and how quickly it can be dangerous. You know, and while it's inconvenient for most of us if we do get the flu, it can be a rough few days or a rough few weeks. When we pass it on to somebody who is higher risk, and you know, it's primarily seniors or young kids, but it can also be people that we wouldn't necessarily realize just looking at them that they can be higher risk. It can be someone with a heart condition or someone with asthma or diabetes. Or, you know, I know several parents at my school right now who are going through cancer treatment, and you don't necessarily know that when you're first talking to them. But these are people in my community who are young, and otherwise you wouldn't think that they'd be the high-risk people, but they're very much at risk.
Since Jill raised it, what is the difference between a cold and the flu?
Well, probably the best way to tell if you have flu is if we're in flu season. You know, when we're in that peak of flu season, when flu is really circulating, almost, you know, 1 in 3 people getting tested for flu are going to be positive for flu.
Flu season is what? November, December?
Typically when we're, starting from the beginning of December all the way till February, even to late into the spring. You know, some of the features of it can be similar. People can get a fever with both. People can still get runny nose, cough with both. But I think a lot of those hallmarks for flu often is that fatigue feeling, that kind of really knocked out, you know, flat on your back, kind of hit over by a truck, people feeling that people describe with getting the flu.
When's the vaccine going to be available this year?
This year we're looking at some of the initial deliveries for seniors and high-risk individuals is starting from the end of September and then rolling through to the end of October and beginning of November.
Is there a delay somehow?
We haven't gotten full dates of when all the products are available, but I think some of the products will be available a couple weeks later into October, which does vary from year to year. We don't always have the exact same date every year when all the product is available.
And is there a difference between getting a flu shot and using like a nasal spray or something like that?
So the nasal spray is a product we've had since about 2015, and it's typically recommended for children between 2 and 17 years old. Unfortunately, this year, due to challenges with the manufacturer of that flu vaccine, we don't have that product available this year. So the 2 products we do have is the standard flu shot that would be for everybody from 6 months until however old, and then we also have a high-dose product available for seniors 65 and older.
What are some of the misconceptions you think people have out there, as you talk to other parents about all this, that they hold?
I think the biggest one is that people think that you can get the flu from the flu shot, and you absolutely can't.
People
It's
still think
impossible.
that?
People still think that. They think that that it's possible. But I think the best comparison, the flu shot contains a dead version of the virus, so it would be like getting bitten by a dead dog. You just can't. It's not possible. You may feel a little bit unwell after you get a flu shot. You might have a little discomfort after the shot, or you might have a bit of a headache. It might just be not 100% for a day or two, but it's nothing compared to the full strength of an actual case of influenza. So that's what we want people to keep in mind, is that that minor discomfort for a day or two, if you happen to have that effect, is it's nothing compared to a real case. Another one that I hear often is that people still think that you can't get the flu shot if you have an egg allergy. Now, if you have a severe egg allergy, I would still think that you should talk to your allergist about it before you go ahead and get your flu shot. I have a minor egg allergy, so until very recently, they told me that I should not get the flu shot, and even as recently as when I was pregnant with Thomas and Jude. But they have changed those recommendations. So now people who have a minor allergy like that are able to get a flu shot.
And you do?
I do, every year.
Every year?
Every year.
Would you give us some advice, for example, to those who say, I never get the flu? Haven't had the flu in 20 years. I feel fine. I manage to skate through the winter every year, and it's not a problem. Why should I bother getting the shot?
Well, I think that goes back to what Jill was talking before about that community immunity. So it may not always be for yourself that you're getting protected, but it may be preventing spread to other people who are going to be more vulnerable. I can't think of anybody who doesn't in their regular life have contact with small children, seniors, adults who you may not even know that they have an underlying health condition that would make them at risk for severe influenza. And so thinking about, you're not just doing it for yourself and protecting in case you get flu, but for also preventing spread to other people who are going to be much more likely to get sick if they do get it.
There is a tendency, I think, to name and shame those who don't. Is that a good idea?
Well, unfortunately for influenza, we see that almost 2/3 of the population are not getting vaccine. So that's definitely a number we want to try to improve on, and particularly for those at highest risk for influenza. So those high-risk groups like seniors over 65, children under 5, people with underlying health conditions, pregnant women, and then all the people who are interacting and caring for them, like healthcare providers and people in their households. So absolutely, we want to see as high numbers, 100% of all of those people get the vaccine. For the other people, again, thinking about that risk, is that really, are you truly not in contact with any one of those groups that you would be at risk of transmitting influenza to one of those people?
Because given your experience, I can imagine you at your school going through there and, come on, parents, let's go. Do you do that?
No, we never do that, because we don't know who the first kid was who came in sick. We have no idea. We don't want to know, because this is our community. These are the people who, they live in our neighborhood, and our kids go to birthday parties together. They're still in school together. We don't know, and we don't think that anyone maliciously caused this outbreak. It was just something that happened. But what we do hope is that people are hearing the story and keeping in mind, okay, this happened in our community. What can we do to make this better? And something that we can't help but think about, Jude doesn't get his symptom. This happened on May 6th. So if you think about now, we're talking about the flu now, and it's September. This is a very long season, much longer than I ever realized. And so it wasn't the prime part of the season, but how many people had the flu before it reached our home? Because nobody just gets the flu, you get it from somebody else. And so what if just one of those people had taken one extra step, whether getting the flu shot or staying home when they were sick, or keeping a sick child home from school, washing their hands extra times, any of those steps that make a difference? What if they'd done one of those things and broken the chain? And so what we're hoping is that people will, rather than shaming people for not taking those actions, remind them and say, you know what, why don't we find better ways to do this? Why don't we, have a better attitude about staying home when we're sick, because nobody needs to be a martyr about this. I think we've gotten to a culture now where everyone goes into work when they're sick, and everyone just kind of pushes through, and instead we end up with an office full of sick people or a classroom full of sick kids. So what we're hoping is that rather than that, people will have a more positive conversation about how they can make those changes and be the reason that somebody doesn't get the flu instead.
Gotcha. I want to thank both of you for coming in tonight, sharing your views on this with us. Michelle Murti from Public Health Ontario, and Jill Promoli, who is a flu prevention advocate. Thanks to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.